The difference between example 3 and example 4 is that in example 4, you actually have to go through and do some math to solve for the number. In example 3, we were just trying to match up which angles were what. Maybe we did a little subtraction. In this one, you're actually going to be creating some equations. So on all 3 of these examples, they tell you that the lines are parallel, which means that it's game on with everything that you know about parallel lines. You just have to decide where the angles match up. So in the first one, if I trace them, I notice that they make the letter Z. The 2x and the 80 are on opposite sides of the transversal, and they're inside the parallel lines. And that means that they're alternate interior angles. So I'm going to make a note right here and just circle it. Even though it didn't say in the directions that I had to give a reason why, I'm using AIA when I set up this equation. So if I know one of the angles is 2x and I know one of the angles is 80, I know that if they're alternate interior angles, it means they're congruent to one another. And so when I solve this one, I get x equals 40. And so that's the answer to the question. You're not finding out how big the angles are. You're solving for x based on the fact that the lines are parallel. So on this one, based on the fact that the lines are parallel, the 100's top right, the x minus 10 is top right in the second crisscross. And so because of that, I can set them equal to each other because, and in this example, they're corresponding angles. And again, I don't need to give this as a reason. I'm just doing this to practice. So because they're corresponding angles, I know that they're equal to each other. So x minus 10 is equal to 100. And so I get x equals 110, and that's my answer to that question. So I'm solving it based on what I know about them, given that I know that they're parallel. On this one, I do it differently. 2x and 110 are on the same side of the transversal, and they're inside the 2 parallel lines. So I know that 2x plus 110 equals 180 degrees. When you do SSIA, you have to make sure that you're careful because you're not setting them equal to each other. You'd get 60, 75 if you 65, 55. 55. You get 55 if you did that. But that's not what you're doing. You're saying they add up to equal 180 degrees. And so then I'll minus my 110 from both sides. I'll get 2x equals 70. And when I divide both sides by 2, I'm going to get x equals 35 on that one. So do notice that if you set them equal to each other and if you use the wrong equation, you'll get the wrong answer to the question. All right. The last one is not meant to make you mad. The last one is meant to give you a picture where you have to practice having your eyes look at the right numbers. So when I do this example, it says use the figure to find the specified angle measure. In the figure, m is parallel to n and x is parallel to y. I'll probably use a pencil at some point during this question, so you might want to get one out. All right. They tell me in the directions which pairs of lines are parallel, but they don't put any of those markings on the picture. So I'm going to put one arrow and one arrow here to show that m is parallel to n. And then I'm going to put 2 arrows and 2 arrows here to show that line x is parallel to line y. So these markings mean that these 2 are parallel, and then these 2 markings mean that these 2 are parallel. And so question A asks you something about the picture where they tell you how big one of the angles is. And then in question B, you're supposed to erase all the stuff that you wrote for question A, and you're supposed to answer this question all by itself. The trick here is that it's not just one transversal with 2 parallel lines, and it's not just one transversal with 2 parallel lines. There's 2 and 2, so your eyes have to be able to look at the right questions. So they tell me in part A that the measure of angle 10 is equal to 65 degrees. So on the paper right here, I'm going to use a pencil so I can erase it. I'm going to write down that I know that this one's 65, and then they want me to figure out how big this one is over here, so I'm going to circle the one that I'm looking for. This angle is on these 2 crisscross, and then this angle is on where these 2 crisscross. So 65 degrees for angle 10 and then angle 7 are not on the same transversal. That means that you can't just say, oh, it's 65 or, oh, it's, what's the supplement, 115. You have to work your way around either this way or this way to get there. So if I cover up this part entirely, and if I just look here, double parallel, so this line's parallel to this line, and this is my transversal. That means that if I know that this angle is 65 degrees, I know that angle 6, so this one right here, is also 115 degrees. because this one and this one are supplementary because they're same side interior angles. So this one right here would be 115. I found that by subtracting 65 from 180. So if I know that this one is 115 and I'm trying to figure out how big this one is, now I can cover up this part down here and I can just use this transversal with these two parallel lines. Angle 6 and angle 7 are on the same side of the transversal and they're both inside those parallel lines, which means that this angle and this angle are also supplementary, which means that angle 7 is 65 degrees. It's important that you don't think that it's 65 degrees just because it's across from the 10. You want to make sure you work your way around the picture. So these two add up to 180, and then these two add up to 180. So that's why those two happened to be the same size. When I answer the next part in this question, I have to pretend like I didn't know anything. So part B doesn't follow from part A, it's its own new question. So they say that the measure of angle 16 is 105 degrees. And again, I'm doing this in pencil. It's the last question, so technically it doesn't matter. But they want me to figure out how big is angle 2, which is all the way over here. So again, I can't jump right from this group of 4 to this group of 4. I have to work my way around the picture. So if I cover up this stuff to start, let's see. Angle 18, just kidding, it's angle 16. Angle 16 is bottom right, and angle 8 is bottom right. So I know that this one's 105. I also know that this one's 105 because corresponding angles are congruent when the lines are parallel. And then I'm trying to get to angle 2. I know that this one's 105, so I know that angle 3 is 105 because those are vertical angles, and vertical angles are always congruent. So I'm still working on this transversal. But now, if I switch to this being the transversal, if angle 3 is 105 and I'm trying to figure out angle 2 and angle 3 are same side interior angles, and that means that they're supplementary. And so I can do 180 take away 105 and use that to figure out that the measure of angle 2 is equal to 75 degrees, since same side interior angles are always supplementary. So what I want you to take away from this example is two things. One, pencils are your friends, but also I want to make sure that you understand that when you're doing these problems, I didn't really have to erase this. You don't erase this on your papers, guys, you're fine. When you're doing these problems, write the numbers onto the picture. Actually, write that down. Write the numbers onto the picture. That's like a big geometry rule. Because when you put the numbers onto the picture, it helps you look at it and think about what other things you know about it. This is true when you're talking about side lengths. It's true when you're talking about angle measures. Writing the numbers onto the picture will help you visualize what's going on so you can use that to get the correct answer to the question.